Sonic has always had great animations here and there, whether it's shows or just pre-rendered animations before the game starts. It's always been really good, but I have to say, nothing will ever compare to the Sonic Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings prologue. The 3-episode series has to be one of the greatest things I've ever seen in the Sonic history. It's so good, in fact, that people that don't even interact with the Sonic community are looking at this and going, wow, this is amazing. And I've been waiting until all 3 episodes come out to get my actual thoughts out on all 3 episodes. And man, what else do I gotta say, but they are just peak. All 3 of them are fantastic. I loved all 3 of them. They're so much fun to watch. The animation is beautiful. The voice acting is amazing. Alright, you know what? Instead of me just gushing about them in generally, how about we take a look at them one by one? We're going to start with the first episode, move on to the second and the third, and quickly go over them and what I love about each episode. Y'all ready? Let's do this. If y'all want to see my live reactions to all of the episodes, go check out G-Dub's reaction videos, because in all 3 of them, I was in them. So if you want to see my original reaction, why don't you go ahead and check him out. He makes great Sonic content, by the way. But let's start with the first episode, titled Shadow and Maria. Our opening is very beautiful, and it's also very heart-wrenching, because at first you think it's a animated version of the Shadow the Hedgehog cutscene where Maria gets shot as they're running through this hall, but no, it's just Maria showing Shadow off the Aurora Borealis. And we get to see some wonderful characterization between Maria and Shadow. We never really got to see the brotherly, sisterly love between the 2 characters, and I think this 3-episode series really does show us, because it shows us how much these 2 characters love each other. And that makes sense. They are the only friends that they could have had on the arc. And it's just really beautiful to see. It's really wholesome, Maria's really wholesome, and holy crap, I have to say, Kirk Thornton is the best Shadow the Hedgehog voice, without a doubt now. I used to think it was Jason, but after Kirk's performance in all 3 of these episodes, it is undoubtedly him. He brings Shadow so much life that I have never seen before. The change between the Shadow that we see here and the Shadow that we see in Sonic Forces is night and day. It is phenomenal. But anyway, this beautiful scene between the 2 is interrupted when Emerald breaks through and starts destroying the Ark and heads for Professor Gerald. Maria urges Shadow to keep going, and Shadow gets his first flashback, as if he's seeing gun soldiers. And you know, this is our first scene that something isn't going right here. So Shadow instead moves on, he puts that behind him and says he'll come back for Maria. So Shadow rushes to the center of the arc where Emerald holds Gerald, and the subsequent fight scene is one of the greatest things I have ever seen in Sonic history. The choreographics, the pure silence, there's no music at all, the sound effects, the way the camera is positioned, the little details, like for example, Emerald copying Shadow's spin dash when only after Shadow does his spin dash, which is exactly like his character was in Sonic Battle. It is phenomenal, it is fantastic, it is just one of the greatest things I have ever seen in Sonic history. No, this is one of the greatest things I have ever seen, period. This is like fantastic animation. After Shadow decisively beats the crap out of Emerald, something interesting happens. As he goes in for a final punch, glass shatters, and it's as if reality has broken. Shadow is then teleported to an area of the arc where he can see the gun are boarding, and he comments on how this is happening too soon, and that time isn't in the right order. Then we have a scene where Shadow is transported into the room with Gerald right before he's executed, and I have to say, god damn, they made this scene terrifying. The way Gerald keeps on moving backwards, chained up, with the light above him going forwards and backwards and flickering as Shadow tries to chase him down before falling into the void is just fantastic. But of course, we get the peak of our episode. Oh my god, this fantastic scene where we get to see Shadow's memories truly collide as he sees Maria shot and unfortunately die, and a silhouette of Black Doom essentially grabs him. And then he wakes up. We then see that it's actually all a memory, and this is like PTSD that Shadow is struggling with. I think one of the coolest parts about this trailer is the fact that Shadow's holding a yellow Chaos Emerald, which is the same emerald he holds in Sonic Generations in the actual game. That's the emerald you get when you fight the rival battle, which is super cool. This is when Shadow realizes that he must get to the Ark. So he decides to raid an Eggman base that we actually see in Sonic Adventure 2, which is seen in Episode 2. Speaking of which, Episode 2 picks off still in the past, as Shadow is looking over a black arm specimen, and we actually get to see Abraham, the commander from Shadow the Hedgehog, appear here, which I think is super cool, as I loved his character in Shadow the Hedgehog and thought he was super underrated and definitely deserved a comeback, which is awesome to see here. He calls Shadow a freak, which is not very cool, and Maria comes in to comfort Shadow, and yet again we get another beautiful scene between the two characters. It's just great to see. Like I said before, I love the relationship between Shadow and Maria, this brother-sisterly relationship. It's just great to see. We are thrown back into the present, and what we see here is very interesting. We see the same Eggman base as we saw in Sonic Adventure 2, which I think is super cool. And it makes sense why Shadow would come here, because he knows this is how Sonic and friends got to the Space Colony Arc, so he knows if he has a chance of getting there, he needs a shuttle, and this is the only way he knows how to get there. When getting there, he's surprised to find that Rouge and Omega, they're also there, and they're trying to get some data for Gun. And I want to quickly talk about their voices, since Rouge and Omega got brand new voice actors. And I gotta say, Rouge sounds a lot better than she did in Sonic Dream Team. She sounds significantly better, both in this episode and in the next one. The improvement goes kinda crazy, I can't lie. It's still not my favorite Rouge voice, not by a long shot, but it's not too bad anymore. And Omega, man, it's also, the improvement goes crazy. Roger's Omega is fantastic, and I think I love him. He's funny, he is written extremely well, and I love the fact that whenever they fight an enemy, his whole thing is like, I call dibs. It's just funny, and it works in the context of the situation very well. But speaking of enemies, the Egg Breaker from Shadow the Hedgehog is back, and honestly, he looks great. And my god, the fighting scene that ensues is absolute peak. The entire episode is mostly fighting scenes, and holy crap, I love it. At the end of the episode, Rouge suggests to Shadow that they break into a gun base, and that they'll show the way if he in return goes to Sonic's birthday party, which does show us that indeed, this is happening at the same time as Sonic Generations is. So I guess that disproves my Black Doom theory. Kind of. Maybe. We'll see. I really hope I'm right about that. Anyway, he agrees, and this is where the episode 2 ends. Episode 3 starts off in the present as we have Team Dark breaking into the gun base. We get to see some awesome interaction between the three characters that solidifies their friendship between one another, which I also love to see. But more importantly, we have the heavy dog from Shadow the Hedgehog returning. That one boss fight that no one cares for is back, and holy crap, he looks awesome. We have a gun soldier in there, which does look very much like the one in Shadow the Hedgehog, which is really cool. And the fight scene between Shadow and the heavy dog is fantastic. Of course, Omega does his classic I call dibs at this point. It's gonna become classic, I'm calling it. Shadow then gets onto the shuttle and tries to take off, but the gun soldiers are surrounding him and about to destroy the ship before Abraham, the commander, actually saves Shadow. And we get to see some really cool interactions between him and how he views Shadow. The way he changed as a kid, and even to an adult, as hating Shadow the Hedgehog to actually wanting to aid him is wonderful to see. The episode ends as Shadow blasts off into space and heads towards the Ark, with these very sad flashbacks and some pretty goofy animation as to how Shadow looks like, but I have to say, it did make me feel a little bit of something. I'm not very invested when it comes to emotion in this franchise. While there was some parts that make me felt something, this was by far the most. It's so great to see this franchise making me feel, because man, I do love it. I do love it with all my heart. But I gotta say, this anime-esque thing that they did, it wasn't the best way to go about it, but I gotta say, that song in the background, it's not even too bad. Though, I was laughing my ass off when I first heard it in VC with all my friends, and honestly, I still kind of am looking back on it. And Shadow's facial expressions are just beyond funny. The meme possibilities with these are just endless, let's be honest here. And that's where our last episode ends, and my god, I have never been more excited for a video game once in my life. The prologue animations for Sonic X Shadow Generations has solidified this game as 100% my most excited video game of all time, and yet again has re-solidified my understanding as this being the best Sonic game of all time. I truly believe we are about to get one of the greatest experiences when it comes to this franchise, and heck, maybe as video games as a whole, although I might be pushing it a little. Well, thank you all so much for watching this short little reaction / analysis video. Don't worry, that massive 1 hour long episode is actually in production now, and I'm getting really close to finishing it, so stay tuned for that this coming week. I hope you enjoyed it, have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you all next time. Ciao!